What's up, everyone? Today we're going to talk about cult book recommendations. If you're new to my channel, you probably don't know that I am specifically known for my love for cults. I feel like some people are probably taken aback because my coffee page, which is very similar to Patreon, it's just a place where you can support me and I give you extra content. It's actually called The Commune, and I have it totally themed with cults because I love a good cult book. I have read both cult fiction, I've read young adult cult fiction, I've read nonfiction, cult memoirs. I have read so many, and I'm going to tell you my top 14, I think it's 14. So my top 14 favorite cult books. These are ranging from 4 stars to 5 stars. So these are the ones that I think that you should pick up. We are gonna start with a young adult fiction cult book. This is Keep Sweet, which you probably know now. There's a Netflix documentary called Keep Sweet. It actually does not have anything to do with this book, but Keep Sweet is like the saying that the FLDS use like for their women to be like, oh, like you need to just keep sweet, you know, like don't disagree or don't do anything crazy, don't, you know, get loud or rambunctious or anything like that. This is a pretty short book, and if you're wanting to see if cults are for you, I would suggest reading this one because it's very easy reading because of it being young adult. There are going to be dark things in it because of it being about a cult, but this is about a young teenage girl, and I think she has like 28 siblings, and it's about how, yeah, when you're young and you end up like getting your period, your husband gets chosen for you, and how sad it is because usually it's not the person, like it's not the boy that you've been having a crush on, it's like the 50-year-old man. And I just thought it was really well done, it was fast paced, and I really enjoyed this storyline, even though it wasn't actually about a real family of any sort. In the back though, for the author's note, it does say that kind of a lot of the information came from the book Stolen Innocence, which is a nonfiction book. I actually have not read that one yet, but it's not like this book isn't, should I say, it's realistic is what I should say, but it is fiction. Another young adult, but this is also fiction, is Gather the Daughters. And I actually read this a few years ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago, and it was my very, very first cult book without realizing it was a cult book. This one is very, very dark and messed up, and it does have an ambiguous ending, so it did kind of make me a little frustrated at the end because I felt like everything wasn't quite explained. It does not have anything to do with FLDS or anything. It's kind of just a dystopian cult book, if that makes sense. So this is about a wasteland where this like group of families are very tight-knit and they like inbreed together. They are not allowed out of this town. People are very rarely let in, and if you've seen the movie The Village by M. Night Shyamalan, this reminds me a lot of that, and so I really enjoyed it. But it is there are gonna be like very kind of disgusting topics because of the inbredness of this cult. So just be careful, even though it's a young adult book. Okay, another fiction cult book is The Roanoke Girls. I read this, and it's not specifically about a cult, but it does have like cult themes and cult vibes in it, in my experience. This is also about teenagers, and they go to live with their grandfather, and their grandfather is not who he seems to be. And so it's definitely disturbing with triggering themes in it. Okay, another fiction. I think I decided that we're gonna do fiction and then we'll hop to nonfiction. I decided a little bit of organization for this. So next up is When She Returned. This is by Lucinda Berry, and this is about a cult. It is about a lady who ends up running away into a cult. She was supposed to be first like interviewing them to kind of see if they were a cult, and then unknowingly kind of got very much into it, and then she comes back later and they're trying to like get the truth out of her, like did she willingly go there, did she get kidnapped to go there, but I thought that the end of this ended really well. I feel like it was very realistic, and so I think that if you like Lucinda Berry, you should definitely pick this up if you also enjoy cults. If you don't enjoy cults, you might not like this one as much. Okay, another fiction cult slash thriller. Actually, I'm very hesitant to say very much about this book because the reason that I loved it so much is because I went in without knowing anything about it. And I feel like if people kind of ruin that for you, then it's not going to be as thrilling. But I do feel like Every Value Break by Peter Swanson fits into this. And that's pretty much all I'm gonna say about it, because I think that if you enjoy cult themes and you enjoy fast-paced thrillers, I think you should just pick it up and not know anything else about it. And I think that you will be pleasantly surprised. Another fiction book is The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay. This is more apocalyptic and horror, but it definitely has cults in it because it is actually a cult that comes up to the door of this married couple and tells them that the world is ending. And it's kind of like an intrusion invasion story. So this couple is inside this house and this cult is trying to like get in to like kill them or do stuff to them. But I really liked it, and having that little bit of cult theme is really good in case you don't want the whole book to be about a cult. Okay, the last fiction book, and then we're gonna get into the nonfiction books. So this one is Cruel Beautiful World, and this one is not super heavy on the cult, but it's definitely there because it is a 60s and 70s vibe. So they definitely talk about Charles Manson, and there is an age gap romance in here. It follows a few different kinds of characters, and I actually really enjoyed this one because even though it's technically like a historical fiction, it felt very thrilling. It felt kind of dark. It had that forbidden age gap romance in it. So I had a really good time reading it. And I think if you wanted something more light cult themed in order to see if you like it, this one would be a good one to start with. Okay, next up we're gonna talk about Educated. This is a memoir, so this is nonfiction. And this isn't technically about a specific cult, but it is a memoir about this girl who grew up, and her family did have very much cult aspects to them because they were anti-government, totally like didn't believe in educating their kids, sending them to school, teaching them anything. So it felt very culty to me. I really enjoyed this one, especially with having like a homeschooled background. There were some things that I could relate to. And just to clarify, I'm not saying anything bad about homeschooling. A lot of people think I always am, but I'm not. But there was things I was able to relate to just because of the shelteredness of this family. But I loved this book. It was amazing. If you like memoirs, definitely pick it up. Then I read Cultish. Now this isn't about a specific cult, but this is about like the language of cults, how other companies that you wouldn't think were cults kind of become cults because of like how they bring people in. So it talks a lot about like MLM companies, it talks about CrossFit. It does talk about some actual cult groups like Jonestown and stuff like that, but I thought it was very interesting. It might be a little far-fetched because at the end of the book, you're kind of like, well, is everything a cult? But I learned a lot from it, and I thought it was very interesting, especially if you like to think about how people get into cults. One of my favorite books of all time is Member of the Family. This is the memoir of Diane Lake, who was part of the Charles Manson cult. She was 14 when she became part of the cult, but she did not commit any of the murders. But this was such an amazing book to read about because I learned so much about Charles Manson. This was kind of right when I started getting into a lot of cults. And so this was a really good one to read if you wanted to have that like very inside scoop of what it was like to be part of an actual like known cult. I loved this memoir. I did not feel like it was hard to read at all. It was super easy to read. I got in a total 60s and 70s vibes. This one does have pictures in it, so you get to see like exactly what it was like. I just loved it. It was so great to me. Next up is Breaking Free. This is written by Rachel Jeffs, who is the daughter of Warren Jeffs, who is technically like the leader of the FLDS cult, and he is currently in jail because of him marrying underage girls. And so if you did watch the documentary on Netflix called Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey, this is actually the book that you would want to read in order to go along with that documentary. So I actually knew a lot from that documentary because I currently had already read this. This book is actually kind of depressing because they do not live a great lifestyle. Like, it feels very much so like a prison, being part of that and having pretty much no say in your life. But I did really enjoy it, and I learned a lot about what it's like to be in a polygamy cult. All right, one of my favorite cult books of all time is The Sound of Gravel. I read this a few years ago. It was one of the first like actual nonfiction polygamy cult books that I read, and I cried when I read it. It's actually in a vlog, so I'll try and link that up above there if you want to watch me like cry in real time for it. But I loved this book because it was actually about a polygamist family and the heartbreak that goes along with it, and the death that goes along with it, and the sickness that goes along with it, and just everything. I guess I just don't understand why people choose to be part of polygamy families when it just seems like such a terrible thing to be part of. But I loved it. There are pictures in the book that I had, and I currently have it lent out on my shelf because it's such a great book, so I needed like everyone to read it. Okay, another nonfiction that I just read was Escape, and this one is very similar to both Breaking Free and kind of The Sound of Gravel. It's just another woman's take of what it was like to be part of the FLDS cult. So if you like the polygamy cult aspect when you're reading about cults, then you should definitely pick up Escape, because this is how this lady escaped. She was actually born into polygamy, just like Rachel Jeffs was for the Breaking Free Warren Jeffs book. So if you like those types, then I would definitely recommend reading Escape. Okay, the last book that I'm gonna put on this list is The Family Next Door. This is actually a true crime if you wanna think about it technically. But when I was reading this book, a lot of the research in it said that this family acted in very cult-like ways. So this is about a mother and father who actually torture, chain up, beat, like starve their kids. They actually had 16 children, and they were only rescued in 2018. So it's very sad to think that this happened just recently. Some of their kids were in their older 20s, and then some of their kids were babies, but a lot of them had like major damage from being chained up for just so many months. But the mom and the dad, like, they kind of raised them for the kids to like be part of their cult. So I wanted to include this even though it's a true crime, because it did have a lot of cult themes in it, and it's such a good book, so you should pick it up. As you can tell, I do still have cult books on my shelf. So I have this one, Cults. I have not read this yet. This is Inside the World's Most Notorious Groups and Understanding the People Who Joined Them. I also have Just Like Mother, which is about a cult. I also have an Amish true crime book, so it might be considered a cult once I read it. I have this fiction book, which is about polygamy. And who knows, there's probably gonna be more that I'm adding to my list. So once I read those books, there will be a part 2 of my cult recommendations, because as you can see, I am obsessed. I love them. I'm always gonna be looking for good ones. So if you have any recommendations that I haven't talked about, definitely drop them down below, because I'll be looking for them, so that way I can go add more cult books to my shelf. But I hope you all enjoyed this, and I will see you all very soon in another video. Bye everyone.